Okay, so let's move on to services. So I'm going to check out step 8, run a gitk. And so here I've done, the Grails, create service, specified, where I want it, and that'll create a service and a, unit test spec for me. I've also messed around a little bit with the controller, and we'll talk about that. So let's close this, and let's open up the project service. So basically what I did was I took some of the logic that was in the controller and I moved it to the service. And this is really where your business logic should be. And I think this is more how Grails should have set it up for the defaults when it generates stuff, but that's just kind of a pet peeve I have. So basically there's not really a whole lot that's interesting going on here, except for services are transactional by default. However, there is this newer transactional AST Transform, which comes from Grails. Before there was a Spring transactional. This has pretty much taken over for that, just because it's more flexible. It was some of the implementation details are supposedly done better from what I've heard, and I know that the other one is I've heard that it was going to be deprecated. So the old annotation will probably be deprecated in newer versions. So something to keep in mind. One thing to note with this, because it's an AST transform, it may have issues with, or collisions with other AST transforms. So in the past, in the few cases that's happened, I've used the Spring one. So I'm not sure how that's going to play in the future versions of Grails, but we'll see how that plays out. So yeah, that's pretty much what a service is. It's just where you put your business logic. So going back to the controller, one of the more interesting things about the service is that you can inject it as a Spring Bean. And this is basically how you would do that. It does it by name, so when you put it at the, in here as essentially kind of like a method, it picks this up. You could do def here, have it dynamically or duck type, rather than here where I'm statically typing it. But the IDE support will, notice this a little bit better if you do actually have the static type here. But essentially, this allows me to just insert my service. One thing that you should be careful about this, while you can insert a service into controller or other service, try to make sure that you don't get circles where, say you inject a service that references a service that injects the service and back to the first service, just because if you have loops, bad things tend to happen. There are ways to work around it. Like by referencing the bean from, like, say, the application context or something like that. But basically, this is one of the ways that you can inject services. Actually, another thing to make you aware of is the Grails application, which allows you to get access to other things, and I'll be showing this a little bit more in a future video, but that's just one thing that you also have access to, and you can insert pretty much any other bean that's already been instantiated in this fashion into your controller or service. So I think that's it for what I wanted to show with services. So I'm just calling services. So I'm going to check out the next step, which I'm going to be showing a little bit of Gorm just within the service. So I'm going to go back to my service, and let's see. So I just wanted to add some extra functionality here, just showing you, some of what you can do with Gorm, and I'm doing this within the service. So one of the things, Gorm is basically the abstraction that's added on top of Hibernate that allows you to actually manipulate and pull things out of the domain classes. So one of the things I'm using here is a where query, which is one of, I'd say, the semi-newer ways to pull things out of a domain class, and basically allows you to specify a closure, and you can use basically any of the properties of the domain object, and use just Java operators to do comparisons between that and maybe a parameter that's sent in. Making note that you're using the $sign because I believe that allows it to do the mitigation for for SQL injection if you use the $signs. Rather than, if you made this like, say, a toString. If I just put toString in front of here, it's not going to do, the actual mitigation, the prepared statement for that. So something to keep in mind. So I'm running this where query, and it's by default it's lazy, so it's not going to actually execute it until I do a .list or a .find, and then what I'm doing with that is I'm running a collect over that and basically building up a more complicated JSON structure here. And as you can see here, I'm doing other things by pulling in like media from the project. So actually, let's go down into the project because I want to show you something else that I added. So one of the things I mentioned before, and this is the thing that I'm calling out here, is the has many and how that can become a performance problem, which I mentioned in a previous video. So this is how I get around that. So I don't have an actual property here for reports, but I know that it's linked to it, so I'm specifying a getter here so that I can actually use it as if it was property access, which you just saw. Same thing with media, and I'm just doing a find all by project and passing in this particular instance. Now these find are they're what was it? I can't think. They're the dynamic finders. So basically, just to show you these within IntelliJ, if you do find, and we'll just do all by, and it does the ... You can do it by any of the parameters. You can add an and by any of the other parameters, and this is very useful and flexible as long as you're doing like maybe say 1 or 2 parameters. Once you go beyond that, I would say you might want to go back to something more like the where query, because look at this. I'm using just 2 parameters here, and the name of the method is really long and it's getting a little bit hard to read. So I would more prefer the where queries. However, one of the things to keep in mind, I've had issues trying to do where queries within unit tests because the dynamic finders, it can figure those out fine, but the where queries, I've had issues. So one way to get around that for unit tests is maybe putting your where queries into, say, maybe a separate method and mocking out that particular method. It's just something to keep in mind. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to do, going a little further into the services and playing around a little bit more with Gorm. there's a lot more that you can do with Gorm, with the finders, passing in parameters, for like say, max and offset to do pagination. Something to keep in mind with that, though, is if your SQL does not support it, Gorm will do weird things to actually, try to support it. And I found this an issue with older versions of MS SQL at my previous job, and basically it would cause a kind of performance issue with that. So, be wary of that. Like in most languages, most SQL languages, I should say, have offset built in. So it's not an issue like, MySQL, Postgres, I'm sure Oracle does, but older versions of MS SQL for whatever reason didn't. So just something to keep in mind. So we finished up with Gorm usage. So I think next time I'm going to talk a little bit about GSPs and we'll move on from there.